Imposter Syndrome and the Asshole Entrepreneur. Next up on the Two Business Guys Mastermind. Enjoy. This business podcast, the Two Business Guys Mastermind, uncovers for you secrets and share tips and tricks to entrepreneurship as they mastermind on how to have startup, operational, and overall business success so that you can go on to get better results. Enjoy. So, hey, everybody, today we're going to be talking about a topic that got me so fired up that I had to literally walk out of a meeting. Rob, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, brother. Doing well. I'm excited to talk about entrepreneurial personalities and
Yes.
that thing of imposter syndrome that I think that we were learning about in that training you and I just
Yeah.
went to. I
And
think that's going to be interesting here.
and I think one of the main things is, everybody, you don't have to be an asshole entrepreneur. Just because you run your own thing, just because you've had some exits or some successes, and this is for the up and coming entrepreneur as well as it's for the person that's already seasoned. You do not need to bring that energy to the room. So, Rob, here's my situation, man. And without saying names and all that kind of stuff, entrepreneur was acting badly, ordering people around the whole thing. Now, as an entrepreneur, it's like, hey, I don't have to be around that energy. I can just leave. And at some point, but I had to make the statement of, hey, look, I don't take orders from you,
Exactly.
and I'm not going to take orders from you.
Right.
And you can change your approach.
Right.
And then he didn't change his approach. And then eventually I got up out of the meeting and just left. Because
And to be
ultimately,
clear, before we get there, let's give the people a little bit of background so that they understand the kind of personality. So the guy that's in the room, if I'm not mistaken, is somebody that is basically a subject matter expert advisor to this group of people who are peers.
Sure.
This is not an entrepreneur that's bossing their employees. We can talk about that, which is different, but that's not what this is, right?
Correct. Yeah, and like I said, without getting into too many details, everybody, because I don't want someone to come on and says, "Hey, I was in that meeting." But at the same time, I think there's for today's topic, I think there's just a way that you can behave. And then Rob and I is gonna, we're gonna get into this. Rob, you've been in leadership, you talk to leaders all the time. I wonder, what kind of conversation do you have with leaders that you got that sense that they've got that negative energy, that they've got that a-hole entrepreneurship energy in them, right? And when I was younger, it was like, hey, I had to take certain things, and you had to go get the bag, so the check it had to come on Friday, so maybe you took some stuff, but then you start saying to yourself, wait a minute, I don't that guy's not going to get me the money, right? So why am I taking this stuff? And I look at that and I go, man, I remember having a bad boss for a period of my career. And I'm thinking, this guy would just go around cussing everybody out, right? And I remember the people that stood up to
thinking
him.
that it's cool.
Yeah, that bully entrepreneurship stuff just doesn't have to happen, everybody.
Exactly.
So what brings that out? Why are people doing this? And then we can wrap in the is that they feel inauthentic, they feel a fraud, they feel imposter syndrome, and they have to be bullies, they have to bluster. What's happening?
Well, I think that a lot of this, and this was the focus of the team training that we went to with another one of the organizations that we helped. We talked a lot about this, which is imposter syndrome, right? A lot of people are unaware of what imposter syndrome is and how it shows up, right? Imposter syndrome is basically a psychological distortion of how you see yourself and your accolades vis-a-vis what what you think the rest of the world sees. So a lot of times what people don't realize about imposter syndrome is that it skews towards high achievers. It skews towards people that actually have the receipts to have a big head, right? But what happens is the people who are high achievers don't believe their own hype, and they believe that, like, they walk around in this with this fear of being found out, that it's just hype, it's not real, right? And so how does that demonstrate itself? What are some of the behaviors that shows, right? A lot of times it shows itself in overbearing type of behaviors. It shows itself in people setting up large barriers so that you can't get to the kind of the soft spots of them, right? They can't be
Sure.
vulnerable.
Yeah.
They can't show their true selves, quote unquote, because if they show their true selves, they won't be accepted. And as we know with, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, belonging is the third level of needs of human beings. You got safety, or rather, you got survival, which is food, water, shelter. Then you got safety and security, and then you have belonging. When people's belonging is threatened, that's almost the same thing as their safety being threatened, right? It's their psychological safety being threatened. So in that space, a lot of people have defense mechanisms that try to make sure that they can be in control of the situation, to try to make sure that they can get into positions of dominance, to try to make sure that they get to assert whatever authority that they believe they're supposed to have. And a lot of leaders have not learned the difference between authority and respect. Right?
That's interesting.
Yeah, and this is one of the things, this is one of the things we talk about in my book, Why Can't People Just Do Their Jobs, right? The big thing, the difference between authority and respect is basically this. People can listen to you because you have a title or because you are in charge, quote unquote, but you will never get excellence from people because you have a title or because you're in charge. You will get compliance from people.
Compliance.
Right?
That's interesting. That's pursuable.
Yeah. And when I go into business, a lot of what I talk, because I talk to, and the interesting thing is that CEOs and executive leaders and entrepreneurs are the main people walking around feeling like frauds most of the time, right? Now they have hyper active defense mechanisms that make them overperform and all this other type of stuff so that nobody ever knows that they feel this way. But if you get a room of CEOs together, inevitably, one of the things that everybody talks about is, I worry about people figuring out that I'm not qualified to be doing what I'm doing, right? Like that I don't know as much as everybody thinks I know, right? And we talk about this. I talk about this a lot in other forums, but as it pertains to leadership, the big thing with respect versus authority is that, right, most times we think that we pay people or that we bring people on our teams, and that by them joining our teams or by them taking a paycheck or whatever, that they're committing to excellence. But that's stinking thinking. When somebody takes a job working for you, or when somebody joins a committee or a nonprofit or something like that, what they have just committed to doing is the bare minimum to not get fired. That's what their payment, that's what their inclusion in the group, that's what all that stuff is. It is, they have committed to doing what's necessary to maintain the relationship. But oftentimes we expect that they're supposed to be doing this up here, but really they only have to do this here. They just got to be better, right? Like there's that joke, right? When two guys are running from a bear, it's like, I don't got to be faster than the bear, I just got to be faster than you. Right? Like, that's the whole idea in organizations. You know what the least common denominator is, and if, as long as you're better than that person, until that person gets fired, you have no worries.
I mean, I think that's a good lesson for us as we think about entrepreneurs. If you think about your journey, you got to know you're going to come into contact with folks like that. Right now, your question is: are you going to go around, with dukes up all the time, or are you going to figure out how to judo those kind of actions? And now, because I've reached a stage in my career that sometimes I just don't have to be around certain energy.
Exactly.
Right? I've just decided not to be. Versus, well, let's go ahead and confront this person and let it be a big thing, because sometimes that just spoils the whole deal. Right?
That's the key.
So sometimes you just remove yourself from a situation, and you may find yourself. Now, if you are that person, this message is for you as well.
Yeah.
If you're the asshole entrepreneur, if you're the entrepreneur out there that feels like, I have to present this because I'm shielding myself from feeling or being found out as a fraud, right? Or an imposter, which, Rob, I was so surprised in our workshop this weekend. this week on how many people feel that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
what levels, entrepreneurs, all the way up to the C-suite, CEO, that
Mm-hmm.
there is a point at which you're constantly feeling like that. And
Right.
one of the questions that I had asked I says, at what point do you not feel that way? Especially like me, I'm always put myself in new situations
Mm-hmm.
where I
Mm-hmm.
don't know something, right? It's with
Mm-hmm.
the ideal of staying fresh, right?
Mm-hmm.
Always having new eyes on something, always trying something new, right? And one of the things I had mentioned about being dipping a toe into Web3 and NFTs and blockchain technologies and all these different things. And I know very little,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I'm instead of feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm a fraud, I don't know anything, what I've decided to do is just call it out. And it was
Exactly.
really funny that our instructor this weekend validated that idea. Just say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, look, identify it. Just
Yeah.
feel like I don't know this thing. Be okay with that and move forward. And I just
Right.
say, I don't know this Web3 stuff,
And
but I'm going to
and
find
the
out.
big and the big thing that I want to add on to that is because a lot of people hear that, right? Because there's a lot of people that have said that before. And a lot of people hear it and are like, yeah, but how do you do that? Right? Because it's not a comfortable thing, especially if you've been used to being the person with the answers, if you've been used to being the successful person, if you've been
Mm-hmm.
used to being the person who gets things done, it is uncomfortable going back to the beginning, because the beginning may have been 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago for you, right? Most people in the professional world, they were decent in school, then they got really good in school, they went and got a degree, right? Think
Yeah.
about it. Of the people that have degrees, it's only 30% of Americans that have degrees. Like, you're already in top third, right? Of academics right there. And this is most people got their degrees after 12 years of school already. So they're at the mastery stage. When you went to college, you wasn't really learning school, right? You were mastering school, and then you get to work. And that was the last time, that transition from kind of college to work was the last time that you were really a newbie. You were really a novice. And from that point on, you were building your credibility. And that may be 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in the workforce, right? And so it's really important for people to realize the journey that they're on, because there's a lot of people that, like you said, when does it end? And I would argue it never ends, because Patrick Bet Davis said it this way: every time you move into another group, there's an
Right.
80-20 in that group. So, right, you notice when you move from the group of employees, there's 80% of the employees that do 20% of the work, and 20% of the employees that do 80% of the work. And
Yeah.
so if you're a top employee, you're in the top 20% of this. But then you go to the entrepreneur group, right? And everybody that's in the entrepreneur group was pretty much capable of doing good at the employee thing. And so then they moved to the entrepreneur group, right? And as far as the work content, now a lot of entrepreneurs were not good at the social part of being an employee, but they were good at the work part. Like, and so, but when you get into that group, now you're in the bottom 80% of entrepreneurs, and now you're starting a business, right? And we know this: 70% of businesses make less than 100,000. Small businesses make less than $100,000 a year, right? So all that time while you're building to get to that top 20%, now you move to the six-figure club, and now you're at the bottom of another group, because, right, small businesses are businesses that are $7 million and below, according to Forbes. So now you're in the small end of $100,000, couple $100,000, whereas there's businesses that are making seven figures and multiple seven figures that are in that top 20%. And then you get to big business, right? And every step along the way, you become a novice again. So the thing that you talked about, which is being able to take that mindset and say, I'm always going to be learning, I'm always going to be new at it. And the thing that I tell people is, you have to like you first. Because when you like you, even if nobody else likes you, you like you. And there's a lot of people that struggle with thinking that they're enough, with understanding that they're capable, with understanding who they are without external validation.
Mm.
And until you can be in a space where you can internally, where you can validate yourself, then the fear of losing external validation will be a primary motivator for you, such that you will work to not lose the external validation rather than to do what's in alignment with or what resonates with who you are.
And oh man, that's so. And so now, so on one level, um, when you see entrepreneurs acting badly, right? When you see this behavior, or if it's you, then there may be that opportunity to I don't know. Do you go up to that person and says, "Hey, I see you. You're not a fraud. You're enough. All right, kumbaya the person or whatever, right?" Or do you just jet out of there and says, "I don't have to be around that energy"? Right. But if it is you,
that's this is a chance.
This is a chance to really kind of reflect. Listen to what Rob talked about, right? This is a chance. If this is you and you're listening in and you're saying, "Hey, now look, if you guys disagree, put some comments down below. Tell us that we're full of canal water or whatever." You know what I mean? And you're gonna just keep charging through life, acting.
Because I'm gonna say something even stronger. I'm gonna say something even stronger to see. And if you agree with me, click thumbs up. If you disagree with me, click thumbs down. I don't think it's a "if this is you" question. The question is, are you aware that it's you?
Ooh, that's even better. Are you aware?
It is everybody that is in this entrepreneurial space. The question is, are you aware of the times when it's you?
That I tell you, I reflected personally on my own energy. I started thinking about times where, maybe I'm rushing the group because, you got it all figured out and, you're waiting for everybody else to catch up. And I wonder, at what point was I that person? So these are self-reflecting moments. And I think once you continually reflect on things, that's when you get past that imposter syndrome, because you become aware of yourself and you say, you know what, I like me. I like the fact that I put myself in situations where I don't know something, but I'm not going to feel like a fraud. I'm not going to feel like an imposter. I'm just going to feel like this is new. I love it. I don't know. I love it.
Right. Because it can be the both and this is that's the cure. Recognizing the both and recognizing that you are awesome and you don't know everything. When we're in class, I tell the entrepreneurs a lot of times the wisdom that my mother gave me, right? Ever since I was a kid, she's always been telling me, she'd say, "Baby, there's enough you don't know to make a whole new world." And that gets more and more profound as I get older because, right, I have 4 degrees. I've started businesses. I teach this. I've written books. I know a lot. And there's still enough I don't know to make a whole new world. And therefore, instead of it being either I know a lot or I'm a fraud, it can be a both and. I know a lot and I still have a lot to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the challenge, right? Too, is to put yourself in these situations where what I like to say is when I'm constantly emptying. So literally last week, I spent a lot of time just giving, spent a lot of time with entrepreneurs just giving back, all different age groups, all different scenarios, right? From, younger ages. I know, Chris and I, we were doing a thing for an organization in here in Grand Rapids, and we sat and we talked with people that were getting their first jobs, and then we were talking to them a little bit about entrepreneurship, but also about how to leverage your jobs and get into other things, right? Just give back. Sat with entrepreneurs for hours just saying, "Hey, listen, this is all free. I'm not going to hit you with my $1,000 an hour, right? I'm just going to say, here, take this." You honor the work by, doing the action. And man, I'm watching some entrepreneurs that are just putting it to use.
Nice.
Sending me messages saying, "Man, I implemented," because a lot of it's action, right? "I implemented this thing and I'm watching it work. I sold this much," right? So I'm seeing the results of the action. But, they needed the little bit of whatever I was giving them. Maybe it's a little bit of inspiration. Maybe it's some A, B, C, D, E, F, G's, right? Do it like this is. And then they implemented it and put it into play, man. And I'm telling you, Rob, there's no feeling better than to know that you're being of use and of service. That's when you get to that validation point.
Exactly.
And you go, I'm not a fraud. I'm not an imposter. I'm not because what I just said helped them.
Exactly. And I think that's the key. And we were talking about this off camera. That's the key, right? The the antidote to the asshole entrepreneur is to realize that your job is to provide value, and not just to provide value in a blustering or bolstering sense, but to be able to provide value in such a way that not only can you feel like you provided value, but those that you're providing value to can quantify the value that you're providing to them. They can tell you what they've been able to do because you were there, right? And that's what a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. I remember,
quantify it.
Right. I remember I struggled asking those types of questions because it feels like you're asking for praise. You're asking for like tell me good things about myself.
Yeah. How did I help?
Right. But what I learned was, and I've been talking to you about, and for all of you out there listening, there's a book, there's a consulting guru named Alan Weiss who has a ton of books. One book that he talks about is $1 Million Consulting, and then another book that he has that I highly recommend is called value-based selling or value-based fees. I can't remember if it's value-based selling or value-based fees, but either one. The whole idea is that he talks about transforming the way that you do business from trying to convince other people of the value that you bring to them. And rather than trying to do that, which gives us that kind of imposter, I am trying to be persuasive to get you to believe, even if I don't necessarily believe that I have this value, because, right, I haven't figured out what the value is, or I just plucked a number out of the sky. Instead, you actually are able to question and to be curious with people and to get them to tell you, how valuable is this to you? What would this do for you? How would this help you? How would this help your business? Right. And so when you look at that guy, the meeting that you just had, right? And these are those instances where where I'm still trying to grow, and where I coach the leaders that I work with to be more curious. One of my mentors, Darren Hardy, says it like this: as you are maturing in your leadership, and right, all entrepreneurs are leaders because you're trying to lead your customer to results, and you're trying to lead the system to be able to provide results for the customers, right? As you're maturing in your leadership, it's imperative that when you go into rooms to get stuff done, that you're asking more questions and doing less talking, right? And, we both know that I'm never in a room at a loss for words, right? But I am really intentionally trying to be more of the question asker and less of the
I witnessed that yesterday. I witnessed that this week. I saw him trying, y'all. I wonder, and I was like, okay.
Exactly, right. And in that, it's really designed to give people the opportunity to say if something is valuable, what is value, right? Because we go in so often trying to confirm our idea of value because we need that for our ego, because we feel like an imposter, because we feel like a fraud. But what I've learned is, I've done this enough. I've coached enough businesses. I've turned around enough processes. I've done enough of this stuff that I know I'm good at it. It's not a question of whether I'm good at it. But that's just because I'm good at it doesn't mean that it's bringing value to people.
Ooh, man, you got to repeat that, because if you listen to what Rob just said there.
Yeah.
Just because you're good at it. It to me, it's like, how do you know it's bringing value? Because oftentimes people aren't telling you. They're just going off taking, the bit of information that you've given them. Either they're doing a couple of things. This is what I noticed, Rob, and I used to struggle with this same thing, right? It was, well, if they didn't do it a specific way, right? Or they did it, they, added some junk in there. I says, look, I would tell people, don't let the brain boogers get in the way. Because I'll tell you how to do a thing and you'll go, well, I want to tweak it, and then not get the result. And then you want to say, no, I told you to do it the way I told you to do it. Right? Yep. Which takes people autonomy away. And who wants that?
And that's the key. Me and Chris were having this conversation the other day, right? And a lot of that goes into, again, it hits our ego, right? Because here's the deal. If I can write a good recipe, even if you mess it up, unless you burn some stuff or just completely butcher the recipe and double some salt or whatever, if you're pretty much within, the tolerances of the recipe, the food should come out at least edible, palatable. Like you should have something close to what I have. It won't be a 5-star reviewed whatever that I made, but it'll definitely be edible. But if you're writing recipes and people are coming out with all kinds of unedible stuff, you might want to look at the recipe. And for so many of us, that hits our ego, because that means that we probably messed up, that we weren't as good as we thought we were, and that we have some room to grow. And so, to that point that you were making, I think that it's really important that we realize our intentions are good, but results are what matter. And we can blame other people for the results, but that, you just said it, it takes away our power. It gives all of our power over to them and says, if you do what I tell you to do and exactly what I tell you to do, then you will get the result. But if you do anything other than exactly what I tell you to do, if you see the world any way different than I see the world, in other words, if you're you, then it's not going to work. And I'm a big proponent of, that's not actual teaching. That's not actual leadership. That's self-aggrandizement. That is ego stroking, right? And
it sounds like that's authority expressing itself versus
leadership. Authority expressing itself versus leadership and respect, right? And when I go into rooms, I say it this way. So many of us focus on being right. But here's the key. If you don't have the power to influence other people to see that you're right and to behave accordingly, i.e., if you don't have the power of influence, your being right does not serve the world. It just serves your ego.
All right, y'all heard it, right? We didn't want to make this a long one. I'm a little bit under the weathers, and we wanted to just drop something in your spirit today. If you are that asshole entrepreneur, here's some ways to unwrap that thing, right? And if you come across this, understand that what that person may be bringing, why they're bringing that energy, at least you may have some empathy and understanding. It's not to say that you have to be in the room with it, but at least maybe you have a different understanding, and then you have something that you can say, you know what, I know they were acting badly today. They may not be a bad person, or they might, I don't know, right? Yeah. You get an opportunity to decide. Like Rob said, it's not an either or situation. It's an and sometimes.
Both and,
right? Yep. And this is what helped me. This is what I needed to hear today, because I was like, if this guy is in any room I'm in, I'm out. And that may not be the best way to go, because there may be obviously some things to learn. And it might take a situation where you pull a person aside and says, hey, you're bringing some bad energy. I don't know why, but stop.
Exactly.
Because it's just not going to have a great outcome for you.
Because most people, when they're bringing that energy, and this is the interesting thing, right? Being a martial artist, you realize it's about how fights work and things of that nature, how fights escalate. Most people, when they're bringing that type of energy, have reverted to fight or flight mode. They're not really in conscious control of what they're doing anymore. They have seen a threat to their ego, to their belonging, to their person, and they're reacting to the threat. And what we see is a negative behavior in reaction to a threat, instead of being able to see a person that's scared.
Wow. There it is, everybody. We hope that you're able to absorb today's workshop, if you want to call it, today's web class, today's, talk, right, on this particular subject. If you like what you hear, subscribe, send it to a friend. Send it to the friend that needs to hear this. Right? Subscribe if you haven't already. And again, we appreciate your time. We respect your time, and we thank you. Go forth and be a great entrepreneur. Rob, again, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I need to be spoke into today like that. And that's what it's all about, everybody. We'll talk to you
brother.
next time.
Great chopping it up with you as always. See y'all next time.